I'm kind of struggling for words here because Thom Yorke is someone that seemed ungettable as a guest. I just wondered whether he would ever come on BBC 5 Live, not the natural home perhaps for Thom Yorke. So it was great that we eventually caught up with him. The reason being is that he has written a soundtrack for a movie. It's in fact a remake of the 1977 Dario Argento film Suspiria. And it is a terrifying soundtrack. If he wanted to spook us in an audio sense in the same way that the new version will spook you in a visual sense, he has succeeded. But don't take my word for it. Let's listen to a bit of the track Folk, and then after that, let's listen to Thom himself talking to me. It's brilliant.
What is?
What you've just done.
Was it?
Yes. It's terrifying.
Yeah,
it's
good.
claustrophobic. It's unsettling. In fact, I tweeted that how excited I was to interview you and just why I interviewed you because of this monumentally unsettling piece of work you've put out into the world.
That's good. Well, I guess that's what was happening.
It was terrifying for me listening to it, but I wasn't terrified by the process of having to create it, which perhaps you went through.
I didn't realise how terrifying it was until I started to put it together as a record. It might sound a bit stupid, but when you work in the context of a film and you're working to, we need this kind of thing here, we need this kind of thing here, and then you make your sort of responses to it. And then when you kind of remove it from that and you just listen to it for what it is, you realise, okay, there's sort of something else going on here as well. I found myself going into some fantastically dark spaces, which was making me feel much better. Partly because I had no idea I could do that, and partly because it was, I think, probably something I've always wanted to do without realising it.
And yet, if the press is to be believed, it took Luca some time to persuade you to do it.
That's mostly because I'm so flaky. We met one time and I was definitely interested, but I was thinking about other things. And then there was one time when I met him in London and he was talking about the central dance piece, which is called Volk. There was something clicked in my head that I could do with it as he was speaking that really intrigued me, and I couldn't sort of shake it off. So I ended up saying, yeah, sure, okay. And I think what finally persuaded me was that I went down to see them in Italy when they were starting to set up to film in this old derelict hotel. And it reminded me of a few times we've done similar things with OK Computer and other records where we rolled up in derelict buildings and spooked out of ourselves on a mass scale, And I was hooked after that, really.
The cliched term is comfort zone, but I don't know if you've ever really had a comfort zone. Do you have one?
Yeah, everybody does. Everybody
musically, creatively.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I could knock up another record of soppy, forlorn, but I'm not going to.
So, in terms of being taken to dark spaces, does that make that any easier when someone is giving you the imagery in order to help you go to those dark places?
This is the one thing that sort of Johnny showed me quite early on. There's a process of absorbing what they want from you, or absorbing a script or whatever, but then removing yourself from it and working in abstraction in order to not freeze up. Because I think if you think about it, if you watch the same sequence over and over again, it makes you stuck, you cease to be creative. The more fun thing is to try stuff and then throw it on the picture and see if you're close or what you can do to make it fit. There's a few sequences that are fairly mega. There's one where this most amazing thing I've ever seen. This girl, a dancer who throws herself against a mirrored room and gradually her limbs break. She's been cast under this spell, and you read it in the script and you think, well, that's going to be a fairly vicious, angry sounding thing. But in actual fact, I kind of went the other way completely, where it's just it's like a little piano melody coming out of a tape recorder. But because of the screaming and the sound effects they put with it, it's the most horrible thing because going underneath someone screaming and having their limbs broken. Things like that I discovered along the way, where the obvious thing is to do something really dramatic, and then sometimes the opposite help is better. And I didn't want to do any sort of normal horror cliches because it was not that sort of film. It is a horror film and it isn't a horror film. Early on, Luca was talking about the melancholy of the film. That's really what I identified with initially. And I loved the idea of taking melancholy melodies and then making them, extrapolating them, putting into places that they wouldn't go, nice melodies, turning them into horror melodies.
Yeah, so you decide to, I guess, in at the deep end, 100%.
It was
Suspiria.
totally in at the deep end.
Right.
I mean, I knew I was in when they were setting up, and there was a crew of 300 people and a clothing department of 20 people, and you're like, okay, and who's doing the music? Muggins. Oh no.
And everyone's looking at you.
Yeah. Can you do this by next week? And you're like, yeah, sure.
Were you ever used to that, though, that kind of time thing because of delivery of albums? When you were signed to Parlophone, it was like...
We never did deadlines. No.
Really?
That was the first thing that went. After Creep, it's like, okay, so we've made you some money, so in return, you don't give us deadlines.
Ever again?
Ever again. It's pretty much the case.
That must have worked well for their third quarter sales. Share price at EMI.
Put it this, they didn't really allow for us making a record during that quarter. Not that it would have mattered.
Was there a point during the process of writing Suspiria where it went from the burden of expectation to the freedom of being able to actually do something that's more emancipating in some ways than writing your solo stuff or Radiohead?
Yeah, I didn't feel necessarily the burden of expectation because I knew what Luca was doing was so different from the original Suspiria. He watched it when he was a kid and he took it in his mind somewhere else, and I kind of understood that fairly quickly, so I wasn't bothered about that. It was just genuinely technically difficult for me. I mean, I can't read music. So I had to go through the process. I was really lucky because I worked with Hugh and the LCO, and they, first thing Hugh said was like, well, it's the same. It doesn't matter. Johnny had been saying that for years, but I'd always I just let Johnny do it because he knows what he's doing.
He studied music to degree level, didn't he?
So, but then I realised what I do on the computer is editing and splicing and moving around. It's still a score. It's the same thing. But things like that initially were like absolutely terrifying. I can't do that. What am I doing? But then the deadline, I begrudgingly admit, forced me to just do it and not sit in the kitchen worrying about it.
So you didn't sit in front of the director, Luca Guadagnino, and say, listen, I didn't do deadlines for Parlophone. I'm certainly not doing them for you, pal.
No, I didn't do that, no. Because I understand, I was like, well, I'm one small cog in a larger Charlie Chaplin movie. It was the biggest ordeal, but it's the thing, in a way, I'm technically most proud of, because if you see the film in the cinema and the surround system's working...
Go to a quality cinema, ladies and gentlemen.
Please. One with a doubly. And bits of it break off into the cinema, the melody. Some of it go in the roof, some goes in the floor, some, the melody spins around the space. And when we had the premiere in Venice, that was for me, a artistic highlight from my career that, to be honest, and I hate saying that, but it was one of those situations where you kind of hope you'll pull it off. And me and Sam, who produced it with me, were like, fingers crossed. And then one day you're just sitting there going, nailed it. That bit was, it was an ordeal, but it was, as I've learned, these things, when you're pushed into a place you just don't understand what the hell is going on, that's usually the best place to be anyway.
Once you've come out of the other end of it, Thom, and if indeed you decide to analyse what are the differences between being in a band, being a solo artist, and then making scores, what would be the relative joys of creating a score as opposed to being a solo artist and being in a band?
Being a solo artist is a drag in a lot of ways, because you can't generate ideas and understand what's good and what's bad at the same time. So it takes longer, unless you're really lucky. You'll have good days and bad days, but a lot of the time you'll be knocking stuff out and no idea if any of it's any good at all. When you collaborate with other people, because you're bouncing ideas off, things happen that you don't expect and much faster. It's a different process. You discover different things about yourself. Watching something that you've doodled with a microphone or whatever be given to professional players and singers, and watching them just bring it to life in a way where, what you've given them is a relatively simple concept, and what they give you back is like something that you just go, okay, wow, because they bring themselves to it. That is super fun.
Have you been invigorated?
I mean, I went into it blindly and it was really tough. Now I'm sort of working with Nigel on my own stuff, and
Nigel Godrich.
Yeah. And I don't feel any sense of intimidation about trying stuff, breaking off into a different place, throwing different... I don't care anymore.
And Suspiria's done that, do you think?
Yeah. I think it was taking control of such a large project and it being such an abstract project.
Did you listen to the Blade Runner soundtrack?
Blade Runner, yeah, I did.
Vangelis as well. Yeah.
Vangelis, I think that was that done on the CS80? It's the heaviest synthesizer ever made.
Electronica geekery coming through there.
Yeah. Oh, I literally, I can sit there and listen to... that's a Moog. Oh, that's a CS80. That's a Yamaha. Oh, that's a... God.
There's a pub quiz waiting to happen.
The days must fly by. I listened to... The one I liked was the Wendy Carlos. That intro to The Shining, when the car is driving towards the hotel. That's amazing.
How, when you're so close to it, Thom, do you manage to unsettle yourself? Because you have to, presumably, as the person's creating it, play it back, and then do you have to create an atmosphere, switch all the lights off, put candles on to go, I want to be unsettled by this? Because it creeped me out listening to sections of this.
Good, that was exactly the point.
Yeah, quite.
Especially towards...
Yeah, I didn't want to go to a rave halfway through it.
Oh, really?
No, yeah, weirdly not.
And you could probably go halfway through, but then you'd have to come back and have a cup of coffee before you started the second record. I mean, it's the record descends or ascends, depending how you look at it. It starts in a relatively easy place, and it ends up in somewhere that is not at all. My studio's in the basement of my house, and I would be most of the time just working and looking at things being dismembered, and the kids would come back from school and carry on.
Well, family business, this.
It's family business.
Noah got involved, didn't he?
I'd be occasionally be like, yeah, you can't come in now, not for this bit. I did some drums on it, which was really fun.
Has it made you think about how you proportion your time in terms of whatever may happen in the future? Radiohead, solo artists, and then scores, because scores take up a huge amount of time, presumably, and in this respect, emotional energy, I can imagine.
That one did. It was completely all-encompassing. If I did choose to do another one, I would try and make it not like that, It was like an obsession, which I couldn't really focus on anything else. So I wouldn't jump at doing a score again if it was like that.
Right, okay. What would the criteria be for the next score, then, that you would do?
Quick.
Right, The Incredibles or something.
Quick and involving not me down in the basement.
Disney animated movie, then, perhaps. Something that the kids can at least come in and...
Nice. Something nice.
Have you seen the whole film all the way through now?
Yeah, have you kidding?
How many times, right? Yeah, how many times? And does it still have the same effect on you? I believe you're not much of a horror buff in terms of the genre as such.
Yeah, it still has effect. I mean, especially the scenes that, that I really worked hard on, and I mean, they don't get old for me, which is really cool. I was obsessed with The Exorcist.
That's right, yeah.
When we were on a computer, which probably explains a lot.
Yes. You used to watch it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
On the tour bus, is
Yeah,
that right?
back of the bus.
Yeah.
Everybody else is watching something happening in life. I wanted to get into the mood. It worked very well for me.
Listen, as self-help DVDs go, don't put that at the beginning of your self-help DVD.
Was that Morricone on the bus at that period? Yeah.
And a lot of you watch. Yeah, how do you get yourself out of that mood, I guess, once you've been sitting on the back of the tour bus on your own watching The Exorcist?
I kind of thought it was funny, so there's probably something wrong with me.
I went back to Hail to the Thief, actually,
Yeah.
and the context around that. And then I thought to myself, the context now seems even more extreme than what led to the energy of Hail to the Thief.
Mm.
And I wonder whether that will at all, or do you feel, well, I've covered what can happen, a resurgence of a far right and a world in kind of chaos, so I don't necessarily need to return to that.
It's been very strange touring with Radiohead recently, how much a lot of the songs, not just Hail to the Thief, period, are so political, and how they seem to have begot more relevant with age when they're taken out of the period they were in. I'm like everybody else. I'm suffering from a form of paralysis, where I grew up in an atmosphere where we believed that we could change things, I grew up watching Thatcher, and I find it and so it was obvious that always to me it's obvious that politics and music go together, and the desire to whatever art you're doing is something which addresses what you see or what you feel, and politics is part of what you see or feel. Now it's like how many times can you watch such a level of corruption being thrown in your face without thinking, why aren't we angry? If there's people dying on beds in A&E or not getting the care they need when they have terminal cancer, then surely at that point we go, okay, well maybe the system's broken down, maybe we should be doing something about it, and everybody just, it feels like the issues that we were addressing then, watching Bush get into power, felt like the end of the world at the time, and then it just keeps getting worse, which is weird. I don't get it.
So then why a paralysis this time when before it was a fuel for you?
Because the nature of formulating a form of resistance is to share that resistance with other people and to have a way in which to express it. And the irony of social media, the irony of Twitter or getting your newsfeed from Facebook, God help you, is that there's no sense of like, is this true or not? If you undermine a sense of truth in what you read, then it makes you immune to what's happening, and then that's when things seem to get dangerous, and then that's when things start to feel a little bit like, that book Alone in Berlin?
I don't.
It's a story of resistance during the Second World War, of people who were leaving postcards, a couple that were leaving postcards around Berlin, when nobody was really prepared to speak the truth or look the truth in the face, or rather, everything was just people informing on other people and so on. And I feel like we're getting to a climate now where that could happen again. It's not there yet, but the nature of the intimidation and aggression that goes with any form of proclamation or on social media, any stepping, putting your head above, means you are creating a climate of fear in the population, and a climate of powerlessness which is then it just opens the door to all the forces that brought us to the Second World War. And that's what's happening. You know, you ask me, how does it feel looking back at those songs, playing them in this context? Those songs, they're like an alarm bell, like a knee-jerk, written by people who grew up during the Thatcher years, angry, properly angry, and expecting that anger to be shared by others. And it is. And when we play those songs in front of 50,000 people, you can feel anger. The irony being, I mean, when we play in America, we play this song, No Surprises. This happened about a year after Bush got into power, and it's carried on happening. Every time we play Bring Down the Government, They Don't Speak for Us, the place goes nuts. You can feel sometimes like something happens, you know. And it was not, that song wasn't written about that at all. But it's just one particular conduit for people. They've come to that place, they want to hear music, but suddenly they're given an opportunity to be angry, properly angry. I don't think we're given that opportunity now, because the anger is misdirected, it's nullified, it's not got a point, it's misinformed, it's being duped, we should be angry, but we don't know where to put it.
Do you feel that then music no longer has the power to change the world, or do you believe that perhaps it never did?
It always has, it always will. Any art form, television, music, painting, writing, they all do, but they are part of something bigger, and they can't change things on their own. There was a moment a few years ago, or a lot of years ago actually, where I remember one of our managers coming to us and saying, Nokia would like to give you £2 million to because you're content creators, and they've got a new phone and they would like content. And you're like, what?
You had a very well-spoken manager, may I say, with this. Lovely, lovely voice. Lovely voice.
Content, and suddenly everything that I've been trying to do all these years, all the way through art college, and, you know, I suddenly felt like, wow, I'm an idiot. You know, if that's what people think this is, content, it's not content. This is life or death for a lot of people. People come up to me in the street and they say, thank you, you've got me through a really difficult period. And I never used to listen going, yeah, whatever. And now I sort of realise, yeah, music does that. And writing does that. These things do that. That's what, it's not bigging me up, it's just what it is. It's the same for any good artist, that you realise that you're trying to make sense of the world, not just for you, for other people. So of course it's important, of course it can change things.
Thom, people be screaming at the radio because you brought Nigel Godrich up. When are people going to hear the fruits of yours and Nigel's labours?
Oh, soon. I'm trying.
After you do Suspiria 2, the soundtrack?
No.
That was definitely a no. Luca, if you're listening, that was a no.
We've already talked about that.
When are we going to hear the fruits of this, Thom?
Hopefully early next year. I don't know. We'll see how quickly. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes not. As soon as I get finished doing all this.
Which I know you love.
Yeah, really.
Above anything else.
I can't believe. What was I been saying? What have I been saying?
Well, whatever you've
don't give me any more coffee.
It's been amazing, Thom. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to me.
Thanks.